On this episode of Down Round,
Ticketing.
Ticketing rigmarole. Why is this stuff fall to pieces?
What's the deal with ticketing?
What's the deal with ticketing?
James,
Raf,
are you a Swiftie?
I'm personally not a Swiftie.
What do you mean?
It's not that I don't respect her as an artist.
Probably one of the greatest singer-songwriters of our time.
Sure. In terms of raw numbers, a bit hard to disagree. But I'm just not – she's not in rotation on my playlists, let's just say.
And yet, you were trying to get a ticket to Taylor Swift, were you not?
Am I under oath?
I'm just asking questions. Why?
Do I have access to a lawyer?
Just answer the question, mate.
I was sitting in the queue, the Ticketmaster queue for Taylor Swift, yes.
And how'd you go?
Unsuccessful.
You failed.
Twice.
And
I waited for the Frontier Touring pre-sale, and I waited again in the general peasantry crowd. I was unsuccessful both times. Yeah.
On this episode of Down Round, we investigate why. Ticketing.
Every now and again we get people requesting episodes. And normally, it's pretty basic stuff. It's kind of like...
No, it's not basic.
No, it's super basic. People are like, mate, computers. I can't get my head around this stuff.
How do you rotate a PDF?
How do you rotate a PDF? I've lost my fucking iTunes password. Can you guys do an episode trying to figure out what my iTunes password is? That's the kind of stuff we're normally working with. And it's normally we'll have one or two people asking for the same subject, but I had 3 people message me. Obviously, they were coming in hot from failing to obtain Taylor Swift tickets. I'm not going to assume, but I feel like based on like the demographic profile of the people asking, they weren't buying Taylor Swift tickets for themselves. They were buying them for a partner. It was the fellas who were like, what is this ticketing rigmarole? Why is this stuff fall to pieces?
Yeah. What's the deal with ticketing?
What's the deal with ticketing? That's down round material.
That is down round. And obviously, I do have a background in music personally, not just as, I guess, the one selling the tickets from two sides of the fence.
You're a buyer and seller of tickets.
Well, no, I'm a seller in 2 ways is what I was going to say.
Okay.
I guess as I did used to be in a band, as I've mentioned, or I still am.
You still are?
I'm in a band. I'm a muser.
You're a bloody muser.
I'm in the industry, but also from an events company perspective. Now, you would think that would give me an innate knowledge of how exactly ticketing works, but the fact of the matter is it's a complicated and weird kind of system that differs from country to country.
Yep.
And that's what we're kind of going to go into, I suppose.
Yeah, we're going to dig into a little bit.
Hopefully demystify. I don't know if it does, because I think the whole thing with the ticketing is like it's a bit weird, like hard to get a gauge on exactly how things work.
It's one of the most confusing and weird industries that's like vaguely tech adjacent. At Down Round we like to talk about stuff that kind of makes sense. Stuff that, has a bit of logic behind it.
Yeah, crypto, for example,
NFTs.
How it's going to change society.
Artificial intelligence, all this stuff. And, we like to talk about business models. Kind of like Airbnb. You've got a house. I want to stay in a house. How are we going to make this work?
Yeah.
Ticketing is a little bit different.
You would think it's pretty simple. Taylor Swift is touring the country.
Yep.
Our country in this case, like Australia.
Yep.
I'm sure she's touring elsewhere, but...
She has, yeah. The Eras Tour. Famously, she's been touring elsewhere.
Exactly, 52 stops in America.
Yep.
And it was a debacle over there with regards to getting tickets. And let's just say from the outset, it's always going to be a bit tough when more people want tickets than there are tickets available.
Yep.
But one of the big criticisms, and this happens here with like Splendid tickets, not now, but previous years, like Splendid tickets and blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, the ticket system went down, it crashed, the software was shit, and basically everyone who missed out looks for someone to blame. I'm not excusing the platforms here, which are usually like unscrupulous and – is that a word?
Unscrupulous.
Inscrutable and unscrupulous.
Yeah. I'll pay that.
New word alert.
Wah.
But, People are always going to be mad when you miss out on.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, like, if you're selling 100,000 tickets and 8 million people want them,
Yes.
no matter what system you implement to distribute those tickets, it's going to seem unfair, and a lot of people are going to get really pissed off. So that's one of the intractable problems of the ticketing universe.
Yeah.
Especially as it pertains to blockbuster artists like Taylor Swift or whatever.
But basically, Taylor wants to sell some tickets to her shows. You'd think it would be simple. She just employs a third party to sell those tickets. Obviously, it's not that simple. For starters, the relationship typically is not with like the artist, and the artist gets to choose which ticketer they want to use.
Yep.
And when we say ticket, like Ticketek, Ticketmaster, Eventbrite,
Moshtix.
There's so many. And you would know that if you go out to gigs, as you should. Like, you should go out in person.
Support local music. Yeah.
Well, sure.
I'll
Be around people.
I'll get off the computer. It's got nothing to do with local music.
Like, listen to music that doesn't come from your headphones, that is in a live environment. Sure, it sounds worse. Sure, it's like smelly and the drinks are overpriced. But guess what? You're around fellow humans. Anyway, it's the venue who has a relationship with typically with whoever sells the tickets. So a venue will enter a relationship with a ticket company. So, like, I'm a venue. I'm Oxford Art Factory. I think Oxford Art are with, I don't know who they're with. Moshtix. I think they're Moshtix. But I don't even know if that's true. You're a venue. You now have a choice. How do we want to ensure people who enter our venue have paid for a ticket?
You want big seckies, first of all. You want big beefy dudes who will form a human wall between the interior of the venue and the line and the street outside.
So first you hire your security third party. 'Cause that's the other thing with venues, right? Like, this is all outsourced.
Sure.
You choose a tap. Who does your taps? Is it Lion Nathan or is it CUB? But whatever. And ticketing is basically the same. So you have the options of this dearth of different ticketing companies. And how do you choose?
It's worth talking about that the centralization of ticket sales didn't really start happening until the mid-1980s. That's when Ticketmaster launched in the US. And they were sort of like the pioneers of the model. They were a phone ticket service when they first launched. Like, you would ring up and call to buy tickets and get them sent to you. Because before that, it was really just run on a venue basis.
Yeah, which some venues still do have their own ticketing systems, right? Like, their own bespoke system.
Yeah. And there's I know the Metro in Sydney still has this awful online page that you go that looks like it's from the mid-2000s to buy stuff. But it's because they want to control the whole experience. And all the other local country-based ticketing services are sort of based on the Ticketmaster model. Like Ticketek in Australia is based on theirs. With the idea being that, you could create a centralized repository where people could buy tickets for any number of events. Like, you could have memberships and subscriptions to what they offer. They handle what is actually a very complicated task, especially when you're talking about huge venues. It's one thing to be selling tickets to a random music venue in the city like Oxford Art Factory or something like that. But, if you're talking about even something like the Horden Pavilion, obviously I'm talking very Sydney-focused for our non-Sydney audience. But we are...
Horden, 5,000 cap?
At the end of the day, we are a Sydney podcast.
Yeah, sorry.
Anything within a 20-kilometre radius of the Sydney CBD, that's what we care about. Anything outside of that, it's not real to us.
Okay, so I want to sell, even if it's 200 tickets though, it's and I want to make sure that for every one ticket I sell, only one person gets in the door, i.e., you have to create individual barcodes and individually identify, make sure there's no double scanning, blah, 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 blah. Like, if you're just a venue that holds a couple of hundred people, you can't build that yourself. Yep. That's tough to implement. You have to have a third party come and give you that technology.
Especially these days with all the various ways that people transact. They want to use Apple Pay. They want to use PayPal. They want to use
friggin' pay as you go.
Afterpay to pay for what I assume that exists. Yeah. Using Pay in 4 to pay for tickets. It's logical. The problem that I think a lot of companies and consumers have sort of run into is the fact that this is naturally one of those industries that sort of favors a monopoly, right?
Yeah.
In Australia, we have lots of smallish or kind of smaller ticketing platforms like Moshtix. You can buy tickets to festivals and smaller gigs around Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane on Moshtix.
Yeah, Eventbrite, which is even smaller, right? Basically anyone can run an event on Eventbrite. You can just create an account, start an event, with 50 tickets and sell those tickets through Eventbrite. And it'll deal with the barcoding and everything for you.
Yeah. And they handle all the promotion and things like that. Like Eventbrite really built out a great solution for like the small to mid range.
Yeah.
Like,
So if someone signs up to your conference, your mini conference on Eventbrite, they'll get the confirmation email, they get the reminder email in the lead up. You know, you can add some questions to dietary requirements if you want for your event, blah, blah, blah. It's real kind of consumer. Anyone can start with.
Yeah. Like you're running an art show in like your neighborhood, you can use Eventbrite to like manage the ticketing all the way up to like a concert. But when you're talking about like especially larger gigs, like again, working with like stadium sized or arena sized concerts, it really like enables like a monopoly essentially, because there's really only a small number of companies that can handle that many tickets, all the demands of like the customer support to make it work, the huge amount of traffic that comes to sites. Think about the big problem that people ran into with the Taylor Swift stuff is that, like they had a few 100,000 worth of tickets and like 5 million people were like logging on
and hitting refresh.
Exactly. Like waiting for the feed to refresh and go on through.
Including bots and ticket scalpers and whatever, which we'll get into.
Bots and scalpers, like it's such like a technological overhead and like requires so much of like support staff to make it work that it basically favors some of only the largest companies. And that's the problem that you get with Ticketmaster, which was running the Taylor Swift like Eras tour globally. They were like the OG. They're still the biggest company when it comes to ticketing globally, essentially. They were basically the only choice for someone like Taylor Swift. She couldn't feasibly go to anyone else. Even her own promoter has their own ticket sales function, but Ticketmaster had to be the one she goes with because she's playing in some of the biggest venues in the world, the biggest stadiums that can host the capacity that's required in any given city for a Taylor Swift concert. She has to go with Ticketmaster.
Yeah. I mean, that's another thing to point out. So if you're like a typical whatever Triple J band, for example, and you're playing like a national tour in Australia, you will typically have to make a landing page that says like, buy tickets to our show, go here. It's a web page with like link to Sydney show, link to Brisbane show, link to Newcastle show, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Because all the venues will have relationships with different ticketing organizations. Like for the most part, if you're like just a normal band, normal size band, I don't know what normal means in this context, but whatever, any band that's not Taylor Swift, you don't have a choice, obviously, on which ticketer is used because it's tied to the venue.
Yeah.
So, your Sydney gig, the Metro is with the Metro. If you're in Perth and you're playing at Capital, it might be with Ticketek or whoever that venue is like associated with. Hence why you have to like link out to all these different ticketing sites. Obviously, like at a certain scale, you probably have more power in some ways. But even like, okay, the canny listener will be hearing that and being like, oh, I see. So if the artist doesn't have the power in that situation, it is strategically incentivized for the ticketing organizations to create as many relationships with as many venues as possible. If you like basically get all of the big venues to be Ticketek venues, like you can only go to Acer Arena or whatever via Ticketek because they're a Ticketek venue, like that's what they use, then that means that you get to literally clip the ticket on every single ticket sold to every massive concert that happens at your venue. Like any big touring artist, Drake's, whatever, massive touring artists, they have to play at the biggest arena in your city. You've basically got one or two choices. And so if you own all of those biggest venues, that means every big touring artist that comes out has to use your platform because you've got the monopoly over the venues. So therefore, what are you incentivized to do? Is it make your platform as stable and rigorously feature-heavy and feature-laden and a fantastic consumer experience for people buying tickets? They're not your actual customers. Like your customers are the venues. So all you're trying to do is like create the features for the venues to make it as easy to implement on their side as possible rather than for the person actually buying the ticket.
Yeah, totally. And this is the thing that makes people think that these ticketing companies are functional kind of like monopolies. They're not really incentivized to provide like a great customer experience. And they also have the power to impose like really, really high service charges. It's funny because, like, you know, you could say that any sort of business is like, quote unquote, a ticket clipping business in that they just take a bit of every transaction. That's like literally what they are. That's where the fucking term comes from.
Yeah.
It's a ticket clipping business because they will whack on like an $8 or $9 or $10 service charge on every ticket sold without really having to do a huge amount.
No. Well, all they're really supposed to do is provide the capacity for people to purchase tickets, which is why people get pissed off, and I would say justifiably so. When I know there's a rigmarole that they intentionally put, you have to intentionally put friction between the ticketing purchase process with someone like Taylor Swift, because everyone knows there's going to be more people wanting tickets than there are tickets available, and there's this kind of side thing of like, that there's going to be a heap of scalpers and whatnot involved, which is why they come up with like verify your identity in advance and like super fan programs. And
and they claim like all these like advanced AI stuff that can identify the behavior of a non-legitimate ticket seller versus a legitimate ticket seller, which is part of their like justification for why they charge so much.
But all of this ends in those quote unquote features where you're like in a queue of 2,500 people, and like you sign up for the pre-sale and then you verify your identity and then you like log on at a certain time and then you're in a queue, which are all supposed to be part of the process of like weeding out bots and this, that, and the other, and there's justification, and that's the kind of reason why you go with like a Ticketmaster, who are the only ones who can handle this much capacity and volume and blah, 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 blah. But in the end, it's just a super frustrating experience for everyone involved.
Yeah, totally. They're not really incentivized to make it a more pleasant one. Because as you say, like their end customer is not really the customer. Like they're just sort of like sitting there like a weird...
The customer, we don't get to choose. Like it's not like, okay, Taylor Swift is throwing a gig and my preferred platform is Moshtick, so I'm going to use them to buy my ticket.
I'm going to buy tickets to see Taylor Swift at Stadium Australia via Moshtick.
Yeah.
Because I much prefer that. You don't have that obligation. You're sort of forced to use whatever company you want. It's actually less of a... it doesn't come up a lot in Australia. It comes up whenever there's a huge concert that sells out really, really quickly. It becomes like, it gets covered a lot in the media. It's been a way bigger dispute in the US because Ticketmaster merged with Live Nation in 2010, which basically gave one company complete vertical integration throughout the entire music industry, essentially. Like you had one company that was running like management of artists, like promotion of tours, plus also the selling of tickets.
Yeah.
This basically raised a huge amount of antitrust concerns in the US. This idea that, okay, now one company can basically dictate prices across the whole value chain to essentially own the whole experience of going to see live music.
Yeah. Because it is good margins. When you think about it, like charging like $7, $10 like per ticket, what the ticket company is fundamentally doing is like there's zero marginal cost, again, per ticket buyer. You've created the technology. All you're supposed to do is keep the service friggin' running, which shouldn't matter whether 100 people or 1 million people buy tickets. Like all you're doing is processing name and email address effectively and phone number, and then sending a friggin' barcode, generating barcode, sending barcode or QR code or whatever to that email address. There shouldn't be any marginal cost. But that actual consumer side of things, they're not really incentivized. Are they incentivized to like get huge data rooms that can handle the bandwidths for when a Taylor Swift puts a concert on sale and makes everything crash? Of course they're not. It doesn't really matter. Another, though, huge aspect to someone like Ticketmaster that's an issue is the reseller market.
Yeah. Obviously, the thing that everybody who is like a music fan or like going to events hates as a consumer.
The scourge.
The scourge of scalpers. You know, people who will buy up as many tickets as they can in an initial sale or a pre-sale or whatever it is, and then resell it at a huge markup because the demand for tickets is going to be huge. There are two ways to approach that, obviously, as a ticketing company.
Yeah.
One is implementing, some sort of measure to block people from buying tickets in bulk.
Yeah.
Imposing limits on how many you can buy.
Yeah.
Identifying the behavior in the checkout of someone that seems like they
captures like which of these images are buses.
Exactly. Totally. Click on the grid of squares for the traffic lights. And I never know if they want to include just the traffic lights or also the pole.
Yeah, exactly. Well, no one knows.
Well, do you include the pole? Well, I know that a lot of it is just feeding like the Google
AI, like
the AI vision beat, but
I don't include the poll.
You don't include the poll?
No, I just go for
I think for me it varies based on what kind of telegraph pole it is. You know, if it's just like a straight up pole, I might include the pole. But if it's like one of those ones with like a long neck that
So it's
that
like hanging over the intersection.
that hangs over the intersection, I'm not going to click all the way around. But then I'm feeling like, what if the application
Thinks you're a bot.
thinks I'm a bot
I mean, have you?
based on that sickening behavior?
I don't know how much time you spent on the dark web, but because they can't use traditional capture mechanisms, I suppose, because I don't know, there's probably embargoes and whatnot, and they don't want the feds on them. And also, they're constantly getting DDoS to the marketplaces for
Sure. For what?
for mind expanding goods.
Okay. Sure.
And guns.
You've heard. Yeah.
They're so hard. They're way more conceptual. They're like, click on all of the tiles that have value, and it'll be like bars of gold, and then like a cartoon like of like Scrooge McDuck like lying on coins, and like this kind of thing to really trick the AI. It's a whack-a-mole situation for the dark web, but
Anyway, let us know what you think, whether you click on the poll or not for the traffic lights. Okay, well, completely blown off course there. But
Point being,
so there's one way you can do it. You can either prevent people from doing it, or you can look at that and be like, business opportunity. Why aren't we involved in the ticket reselling market?
exactly,
Yeah.
because you're Ticketmaster, or even if you're an audience. Here's the pure libertarian argument for like the reseller market or whatever. All that's showing is that there's a failure in the pricing mechanism, in that Taylor Swift should have been selling her tickets for a higher price.
Every ticket to Taylor Swift should have been $5,000.
Yeah, and so if there is like an intermediate person who is able to create value there and make sure that the market is functioning correctly and sell the tickets at an appropriate price, why shouldn't there be?
Yeah, exactly.
Like scalpers are just providing a market surface, providing liquidity for the market. People who want to see Taylor Swift the most will pay $5,000 for a ticket to Taylor Swift. Like, it's fantastic. So what's the issue here?
Yeah, in an economic vacuum, that makes complete sense. But obviously, people do get a little bit skeezed out when there's a ticket that was allegedly $150 and now it's being sold for $1,000.
And what an opportunity, because like Ticketmaster, is only able to charge kind of $8-9 per ticket sold to Taylor Swift, who's put 800,000 tickets on sale over America or whatever it is. But what if they could take a percentage of all of those tickets sold on the reseller market?
Yep.
Which they do.
Yeah. And like there's also the practical fact that it's like when you buy from a scalper, you have no idea whether it's legitimate.
Yeah.
It's a naturally sleazy kind of market where you're going onto Amazon or you're going, onto eBay or going wherever.
Where it used to be people standing out, and probably still is to a certain extent, the front of venues being like, anyone want a ticket?
Yeah, like those were the original scalpers, were the guys that were standing out in the front and selling it. And yeah, you're right. They probably still do it. I haven't seen it in a very long time, but especially now that it's all on phones and shit, it's probably harder to pull off. But a lot of marketplaces have popped up. The US is kind of like the ground zero for this stuff. StubHub is a company that for a very long time that has basically run marketplaces for reselling tickets where they verify it and they say that you're actually buying someone's a legitimate ticket. Viagogo is another one, which is a little bit on the less reputable end. Some of their techniques are not quite as above board as StubHub, although StubHub obviously saw value because they acquired them for $4 billion in 2020. There's been a long war against Viagogo and like the Australian media for like 5+ years because they are and have been in the past like an incredibly aggressive in their marketing of secondhand tickets or secondary market for tickets.
That, like, if you look up gang of used tickets, your number one hit on Google will be a Google ad saying official gang of used tickets here.
Yeah,
and it's not. It's not the official.
It's not official.
I mean, officially you can go to the gig.
You can go there. You just might be paying a few $100s over what is even a market rate for secondhand tickets. Because the benefit of these platforms is that they can charge a huge premium on tickets, right?
Yeah.
Like Ticketmaster can take its $9 to $10 per ticket, and at a scale that's huge. But if you're paying several $100s for a ticket because you're desperate to go see Taylor Swift.
Yeah, and there's no real clarity over what the actual market rate is.
Yeah.
Because like a band will say, tickets on sale now, front row, $90. And then you're like, okay, great, I'll grab the $90 ticket. Oh, okay, there's like $9.85 on top. Whatever, I'll just pay it. As opposed to, I really desperately want to see this and I don't know what the price is. It's $285. Okay, sure, whatever. And you have no real insight or transparency over where that money's going.
Yeah, and you get to the checkout and there's like a $35 platform charge on it or whatever. You're just like, okay, whatever. I just really need to see Paul McCartney ASAP. Like, I need to see Paul McCartney now.
Yeah.
That whole market is basically – it's one of those things, again, if you take a purely economic lens, as you said, they're providing liquidity.
It's the market working as intended.
It's helping to reprice tickets in a way that reflects demand, but that's just not really how society functions.
What you end up with, only people who can spend $3.5, $5 to see Taylor Swift will be able to see Taylor Swift.
Exactly.
And I don't think really no one wants that.
No one wants that.
And Taylor makes $13 million a show. She could be making 26.
That's it. No, totally.
But I think she also recognizes that if that were the case, she would have less fans and blah, 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 blah.
No, exactly. And this also gets to sort of the unspoken fact. There's so much insane discourse around live ticket sales for like a few different factors. And I think it all comes down to basically music streaming.
Yeah.
Right? On both the consumer and like the artist side and the promoter side. If you are a big artist, you are going to be making the lion's share of your outsized profits where they exist from touring, right?
Live music, yeah.
Like Taylor Swift certainly makes a lot of money from Spotify and from Apple Music and all that sort of stuff. She's an extreme example because she would make enough from her royalties.
She's probably the biggest artist in the world right now, let's be honest.
Yeah, she would be making enough from her royalties from like that Spotify, Apple Music pool to be living a very comfortable life.
Yes.
But for like your average artist who is, even if they're quite popular, probably not making a huge amount of money from that, certainly not even scratching the surface of what they would have been making under like the CD record sales model. That's where they make their money, from selling out, even if you're an arena band that plays like a 15,000 seat arena,
you're making bank.
You're making bank from that you wouldn't be making
from 30 million streams on Spotify or whatever. Like, it's just not going to – it's going to pale in comparison. The streams I'm talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So artists need to like be like absorbing more from touring. Touring is more and more critical. They need to go through one of these entrenched middlemen, which is probably like the ticket masters, especially if they're playing at bigger venues. Ticketmaster is like one of the few options.
Well, yeah, to summarize, it's like if you want to play big venues, you have to deal with whoever the big venues ticketing platform is, which how do they form those relationships? A little unclear. Like, what's in it for the venues? Yes, there's definitely like certain platforms are just like we're the only ones who can sell 30,000 tickets like to a single venue, and there are those benefits. Are there lunches and things going on?
There's got to be lunches.
There's got to be lunches, right?
Absolutely. Imagine the Ticketmaster sales guys and their lunches with the guys that run arenas.
Yeah. If you're a venue manager for like a 30,000 person venue,
the wine would be flowing.
And you'd probably be taking lunches at least annually with a few of the other people, but you know that, come on.
No, please.
You're going to stick with Ticketmaster.
You got to stick with the big dogs. This is just Christmas party season.
Yeah, and so you sell the tickets. Then there's this whole secondary market, which it turns out some of the biggest players are like, well, we should get a piece of that as well, because we're seeing these tickets that we're selling for $100, $150, going for $1,000 to these ticket resellers. We can come in and also like their kind of claim, which is true, is that we can at least verify the ticket purchase and stop people getting scammed, and know that if you're buying via these platforms that you actually will be able to enter it and also take a huge margin on that. The issue obviously being then you're kind of incentivized as a business to allow scalpers to take all the tickets, which in some markets is exactly what happens. If you try and buy a ticket to a baseball game in America, you don't go to like the venue or to a Ticketek. You go directly, like, quote unquote, like the LA Dodgers are sold out for 4 years, all of their tickets. They're not sold out. They're sold out to like scalping platforms, which you then go to the scalping platform to buy a ticket from the scalping platform, because they've literally bought every single seat in the stadium for years, like in a row, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's a situation where you end up. And then you have that weird, like, every single seat is some kind of like auction bid market spread thing where they're just trying to make a margin across like 4 years of tickets, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, like, that's where you kind of end up. And in a situation where, as we said, the ticketing company's main customer is the venue itself because they're incentivized to just monopolize as many venues as possible so that customers don't have a choice on which platform they have to use. And they have to use you if they want to see Taylor Swift or whoever it is.
Yep.
And that's where we're at.
It's a good situation, I think.
Well, yeah. It's where we're at.
Yeah.
But you got a ticket in the end.
My partner did through some like chicanery, basically.
Yeah.
You know, this is the thing. It incentivizes a situation where like if you do get to the front of the queue, and this was also the funny thing because, you know, part of the hype generation process is that like a queue is good.
Yeah.
You know, for the ticket seller, the idea that even though it's all digital now, and this isn't the old days where they used to have like the ticket tech stand in the middle of Maya or whatever.
And a line around the corner.
And like it looks
people sleeping out.
Yeah, exactly. It look like this sort of vibe you can get for like an iPhone launch that you can't get for tickets these days because people aren't queuing up to do it physically. But having a line where it's like you're in the queue.
Yeah.
And then it like refreshes every 10 seconds, like huge vibe. But it turned out that, you know, a lot of people got mad because they were queuing up for like the Ticketmaster pre-sale for Taylor Swift. They thought that, you know, if they got there at 8 a.m. for a 10 a.m. launch, that, you know, they would be at the front of the queue physically as they would be if they got there a few hours early for the physical box office. Didn't turn out that way. It's just kind of like randomly allocated. If you got there at 8 a.m., it was the same as getting there at 10 a.m.
Yeah. The number in the queue, it didn't matter.
No, because exactly.
At the end of the day, more people wanted tickets than there were tickets available. And this is like the part of me that's like, how do you fix this? And it's like, well, if you have any problem of allocation like that, then there are two mechanisms. One, is it's an auction model. And just like you set the price floor at whatever 400,000th person is willing to pay. I don't love that.
No, totally.
I don't think anyone likes that.
I don't think anyone likes that.
Because it's not sustainable. Like, it's not like a sustainable business
I think it's like actually an intractable problem. And like, you know...
and then, the other one is like, some kind of randomization lottery system.
Like a full-on lottery where like you're told from get-go.
Yeah, except that's basically what we have, just with all this fugazi, like you're in a queue and then true fan verification and capture, and then you're in another queue, and this allows you access to the VIP queue, and it turns out that your number in the queue doesn't matter at all, and the website crashes constantly, and you get re-put to the back of the line. That's actually what we have, a lottery.
We have a lottery, but they need to occlude it a bit because they have so many like pre-sales and like as you say, like fan club sort of thing.
Yeah, and they try to tack on subscription models and
priority
access.
And, you know, artists like Taylor Swift are partially to blame for this kind of stuff because like she has really lent into like the old fan club model that artists used to have.
That was one of the reasons she apparently she went with Ticketmaster, is they have this kind of true fan like round of buying or whatever. They have
exactly.
Like a true fan, and you identify yourself somehow as a real person.
You can't do that with a full on lottery because it has a thing. And you know, Ticketmaster has experimented with like quote unquote dynamic pricing in the past, and with basically the same way they do it on airlines.
Yeah.
You know, airlines. I think there's like a different like economic model. You know, I think most people accept the sort of insane dynamic pricing of airlines and like the sort of complete like law of the jungle shit that goes down with flights because there's no cultural cachet. You know, it's
it's also a commodified business. It is different because it's like there are heaps of flights going. There's pretty much you get more supply than demand for the most part. There's an equilibrium.
You get
a bit of an equilibrium. Whereas like a Taylor Swift concert in Sydney, there's one.
Yeah, you get on Skyscanner and you're like, I want to get to Los Angeles. And it's like, there's a direct flight with Qantas. Oh, but I can pay $200 less. And it's like 6 legs and I go through Iceland for some reason.
Yeah.
And it's Air Hawaii. I'm in it. But like, you know, you can't really get away with that when there's like that weird fan relationship. And like, you know, if something is fucked about the process, the average fan...
Like the person on Twitter who is doing a search for Taylor Swift and then flaming anyone who posts a negative comment about, like, you want them to get a ticket to your show.
Yeah, you need those people to have a ticket.
Like if they missed out on a ticket, you've got problems.
You got to, exactly. Like it's mutually assured destruction. It's like giving a nuclear bomb to a terrorist, basically. Down round verdict. Intractable problem, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, a bit of more transparency would be good. Like,
yeah.
Obviously, the problem with the lottery mechanism is that do scalpers then win in that? But like, bit more transparency rather than just like, we have devised the perfect system that's going to piss off everybody,
Yeah.
which is the current status.
Yes.
Maybe that's fine.
That's fine. Well, like I like to see everyone a little bit mad. It gives us the energy to innovate.
Yeah, that's true. Bit of a kick up the rear end.
Down Round now has a Substack where we are running our premium podcast, a second episode every week, plus plenty more goodies to come in the future. So head to downround.net to sign up.